Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Bible study on YouTube. I am so grateful that that we have YouTube so that I can do this with you. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do a Bible study because I'm here with Ed. Anyway, we are doing the YouTube Bible study for this February 9th, 2026. And it's kind of, we're looking back at the story of Adam and Eve. And then the following week, we looked at the consequences. That was last week for each of them. And now this week, we're going to zero in on the consequences for the serpent, Satan. And that is found in Genesis 3:15, and this is called the proto-evangelium. That is the first gospel, and we're going to read through it. If you have it, there it goes, 3:15, the first gospel. Now this is God speaking to the serpent concerning his consequences. Now we know that he had to eat dust. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat. But this is concerning the future. And God says, that is God, will put enmity, that's animosity, anger, hatred, between you, Satan, and the woman, Eve. Between your seed, Satan, and her seed, that is Eve's seed. And he, that is Eve's seed, shall crush you on the head. But you, Satan, shall crush him, that's the woman's seed, on the heel. Now, you never get it if you just read it once. So we're going to read it again because that brings clarity. And God says, I will put enmity, animosity, anger, hatred between you, Satan, and the woman, Eve. Between your seed, Satan, and her, that is Eve's seed. And he, Eve's seed, shall crush you on the head. Now, to be crushed on the head is fatal. But you, Satan, shall crush him, that is the seed, the woman's seed, the Messiah, on the heel. Now, we know that we have something going on here. So here's what I want you to do. It says, I, God, will put enmity between you, Satan. So before the words between you, Satan, put an A. Okay? Put an A just before between you, Satan. And then before the woman, that is Eve, put a B. Can you do that? Okay, then the next line, between your seed, Satan, speaking to Satan, put an A before between your seed. And then her, or Eve's seed, put a B right before that. So we have Satan being spoken to, and he is your A in that first line. And it's between you, Satan. So he's first. He's spoken to first. And then the woman is spoken of. And then the next line, and a B before the woman. In the next line, an A between your seed, and B before her or Eve's seed. Now note something. Satan is spoken of first in each of those two lines. And it's as though Satan is the victor. And we can see that. He was the victor in the garden, wasn't he? He was the victor throughout Israel's history. They just kept disobeying God over and over and over again till he sends them into captivity. But the last line, there's a reversal. Look at the last line. And he, Eve's seed, shall crush you on the head. Remember, it speaks about her seed second in lines 1 and line 2. And now her seed is spoken of first. So put a B in front of that. And then he speaks of Satan. But you, Satan, shall crush him, that is the woman's seed, the Messiah, on the heel. So the woman's seed is the Messiah. But now Satan is spoken of second. So put an A for Satan there. Before you, Satan, shall crush him, the seed, on the heel. There's a reversal. It looks as though throughout history, Satan is the winner. But the proto-evangelium, the first gospel, tells us, the Messiah, Eve's seed, shall crush the serpent on the head, and that is fatal. But you, Satan, shall crush him, that is the seed, the woman's seed, the Messiah, on the heel. This is not fatal. What happens to Satan is fatal. What happens here to the seed is just considered a bruising or crushing of the heel. And that isn't fatal. No. Why can we say that when the Messiah dies? It sounds like he's not the victor, but he is the victor. Why? Because of the resurrection. Jesus, the Messiah, is the victor over Satan. Got it? Okay. Now we're going to go to the story of Cain and Abel. I want you to get your Bible. I'm going to get mine too. And I want you to go to chapter 4 of Genesis. Genesis 4. To the beginning of the story of Cain and Abel. And it says this: Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. That's the beginning. Adam knew Eve. She conceived and bore Cain, and she names him. Let's go to the end of the chapter. Now, at the beginning of the chapter, we have the story of Cain and Abel and how Cain murders Abel. Then Cain's genealogy is given in chapter 4. After that, in the story of Lamech, Cain's descendant, who also murdered someone. But then we have the conclusion of the chapter in verse 25. And Adam knew his wife again. Remember, he knew his wife in the first place. Now he knew his wife again. And she bore a son and called his name Seth. So the son's name is given. The first son, Cain, his name is given. And then she's going to say why he's named Seth. God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. So in the first verse, we know that Cain was named, and then she tells us why he's named Cain. She says, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And Cain means gotten. I have gained with the help of the Lord. And the last verse we read, verse 25, she names another son, and she gives the reason for naming him Seth. God has appointed for me another offspring. And Seth means appointed. Yes. So Adam knows his wife at the beginning and at the end. The wife, Eve, conceives at the beginning and at the end and bears a child, names the child at the beginning and the end, and then tells why she gave that name for that child at the beginning and the end. Do you remember what we call that? Bookends. Our author is saying you have to see the whole story, not just the Cain and Abel story where you find out that Cain murders his brother, but you have to see Cain's genealogy and that one of his descendants murders just like he does. Murder at the beginning of the story, murder at the end of the story between the two births. Okay, so we'll go back to those two verses because I want you to see how they line up so well as bookends. But go to the next page, the page of Adam and Eve. And it says, now Adam knew Eve, his wife. Oh, got to tell you. Whenever you read anything in the Old Testament, you gotta look for repeated words. We've been discussing that, and there are at least 2 repeated words. Now you'll know which ones they are because they're repeated, and that is the word Abel. So I want you to circle Abel, and or I want you to circle brother. Now, if it's too complicated for you to circle both of them as we're reading through, just choose one or the other, Abel or brother. We're going to look and figure out why. Now, Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of Yahweh. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to Yahweh an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And Yahweh gazed with favor at Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he did not gaze with favor. Okay, next week, when we return, we will talk about why Abel's offering was acceptable to God and why Cain's was not acceptable. But you have to come back next week. The word gaze is probably translated looked, but it The Hebrew word means more than just take a look. It means to look intently or gaze. And so that's why I put in the word gaze here. So Cain was very angry and his face fell. Yahweh said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door." So we have to ask again, just like we did up top, we have to ask, what did Cain not do well? And we're going to answer that next week. Okay, in the midst of verse 7, let me start with 7 again. If you do well, will you not be accepted? What do you have to do well and be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, and you must rule over it. Cain spoke to Abel, his brother. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then Yahweh said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And Yahweh said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand." So did you notice we have the word curse? And remember, up until this point, though Adam and Eve weren't cursed because they would bear, through them would come the Messiah. But remember, the ground is cursed and the serpent is cursed. And now we find out that Cain was to be cursed from the ground. The third time we're hearing about the curse. Verse 12, when you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. And Cain said to Yahweh, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground and from your face. I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And Yahweh put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. Okay, now I want you to take just a couple minutes and count how many times you circled brother. Now, if it takes longer than I'm going to give you, you can always put it on pause and make sure of it. Or the word able. Or if you want to do them both at this time, go ahead and do them both. And see how many times it says brother. And see how many times it says able. And then I want you to figure out who the brother is that is being spoken of every time it says brother. I'm going to give you a little time, but if you need more, just put it on pause. Okay, put it on pause if you need to, but we're going to go ahead with it. If you circled brother 7 times, you are right. if you circled uh, Cain or Abel 7 times, you are right. So, why 7? Well, ever since the first chapter, the first week, 7 has been God's number. He does things very often in sevens. He repeats sevens. I think we remember that there were 7 feasts in Israel's law. There's just a lot of times what is spoken of 7 times throughout a whole book. Yes, so 7 is God's number. So what is he saying? He's saying first that Abel is God's man. But how about brother? What is he saying about brother? I think that this is reminding us or telling us or emphasizing to us how horrible and despicable Cain's murdering his brother was. He didn't murder someone who had hurt him. He did not murder an acquaintance. He didn't murder a stranger. He murdered his own brother. So when it repeats brother, it's just hammering in over and over and over that he killed his own brother, God's man, Abel. Okay, so we said we're going to look at the first verse and the last verse. That's this page, or the verse near the end of the chapter that tells us that that's the end. And I want you to look and see what things are repeated in both verses. Now, we talked about it, but now you can circle it. Circle the things that are the words that are the same, or the things that are the same. Take a little bit and circle them. That's what I did on mine. I never give you an assignment that I haven't already done. If you need more time, just put it on pause, and we're going to look at the verse. In verse 1, it says, "Now Adam knew his wife." And if you look at verse 25, it says, "Adam knew his wife." So that's the same. So you circle those two. Then it says, "bore Cain" in the first verse. And in the verse 25, it says, "bore a son." In the first verse, it tells us what that son's name means. And it says, Eve says, when she bears him, "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord." And again, in verse 25, "God has appointed for me another seed or offspring instead of Abel." So we know that Cain is gotten. Cain is gotten, and appointed is Abel. Now, I want you to think about the difference between what she said at the beginning and what she says at the end. Let's look at the beginning again. "I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord." I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Or in verse 25, look what the first word is. God has appointed for me another seed or offspring instead of Abel. God has appointed for me another seed. Do you see the difference between I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord, or totally God has appointed for me another seed? Now we have to ask ourselves, why the difference and what happened that caused her to have such a difference that she changed from an I to God. Grief can drive you to a deeper faith or drive you away from God. Let me say that again. Grief can drive you to a deeper faith or drive you away from God. For Eve, it drove her to God. Can you see the difference? What was her grief? Her one son murdered her other son. Can you imagine the grief that she went through? I am really not sure the things that have happened in your life, what things happen in your life to introduce you to grief. The death of a child, the death of a husband or wife, the death of a mother or father, the death of a friend. I've had the death of a child, and I had to make a choice. Was it going to drive me to God, or was grief going to drive me away from God? If it drives you to God, grief softens with time. I know because I've gone through it. And although I grieve still for my daughter, and it's been 14 years, it softens over the years. I didn't think that that was possible. I thought when she died, I would die of grief. It was so painful. But I kept turning to God. And over time, a long time, it softened. Didn't go away, but it softened. If it drives you away from God, grief hardens into bitterness with no relief. Let me say that again. If it drives you away from God, grief hardens into bitterness without relief. But if you turn to God, trust Him, it softens with time. Grief softens with time. God bless you, and see you next week.